Well, stories for souls of all ages. Kid Mercury is with me, and we know Kid Mercury is the trumpeter for the Montreal Canadiens for decades. Never knew him as a children's author, but he's got this great book. I've been reading it. It's a beautiful book. But let's start off, Kid, on a few things. First of all, your real name, your first name is Harvey. We won't say your last name. Tell us, why don't you want people to publicly know your last name?
Mike, I'll be honest with you. I feel a bit like the Superman Clark Kent. My whole time I've ever been in the public eye, I've always been Kid Mercury. So when people would say, like, who are you really, this and that, I'd say, hey, that's my secret identity. So I've kind of worked that. It's become part of my shtick, so to speak. But I did grow up in Côte Saint-Luc, and with a name like Harvey, you know, I'm one of the tribe.
Yes, exactly. And so that's interesting. So tell us, how did you get the name Kid Mercury? Ted Teven had something to do with it.
Yes, Ted Teven, for the younger listeners who don't know who Ted Teven was, he was like the person who had the best sports show when I was growing up as a kid in Côte Saint-Luc. And I would listen to Ted on my little transistor radio. And I've been writing poetry since I was a very young kid, Mike. And I wrote short stories. I really enjoyed doing that. And I once called him up with those. It was during the pennant drive in 81, I believe, 79, 80, 81, one of those 3 years. And I had never called his show before. And I said, I have a poem I want to read. And he said, a poem? I said, yeah. So I read him this really great sports poem. And after, he said, who is this mystery caller? And I said, my nickname in high school was Mercury because I was sort of like the winged messenger. People would tell me anytime they needed some advice or some help or just some fun, I would pop in on the scene. So Mercury was like the winged messenger. So I just said to Ted Teven, I said, Mercury. And he said, Mercury? Mercury who? Mercury what? And I just spit out at that second, Kid Mercury, because Gary Carter, I love the Expos, Gary Carter was Kid Carter, the most enthusiastic player we've ever had. And I'm exactly like him when I play sports or even watch sports. So I said, Kid Mercury. And he said to McGarity, the guy that, you know, would take the calls, he says, McGarity, anytime Kid Mercury calls, put him right through. And I was born, the legend was born. So thank you, Ted Teven.
Yes, after he asked McGarity for a Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, you know,
I remember. Boy, so many Ted Teven stories. So you grew up in Côte Saint-Luc, did you not?
I did grow up in Côte Saint-Luc, and actually, I must tell you something, Mike. In my book, in Stories for Souls of All Ages, there are many hidden little anecdotes here and there, all over the place. And in the last story, Zigzag the Zebra, there's a picture of a house where Zigzag the Zebra, yours truly, lived, and on top of the house, it has my address, 5604. I grew up on Borden Avenue in Côte Saint-Luc.
Okay. All right. Right near Tifereth Beth David Jerusalem congregation.
Down the street, and I went there. I went to Merton School, but my parents sent me to Hebrew school right down the street. And
okay, you know, that's good to know, because what I'm going to do in the fall is I'm going to bring you to Merton School to read your book to the young children in kindergarten and grade 1.
Wow.
So I'm glad you just told me that. An idea is born. The kids will go crazy because I bring the graduates back to their old schools all the time. And we'll bring you to the Côte Saint-Luc Public Library as well. The book you gave me, which I love, even as a grown-up reading it. So we're going to get to the book in a minute. So let's go back to your trumpeting days at the Montreal Canadiens games. When did that all begin?
That began with the Montreal Expos in the mid-70s. I had just returned from working at Club Med. I was the entertainment director, animateur at Club Med in the 70s. And when I came back in 79, I felt there was a lull. I went to a couple of games here and there, and I just was like, the crowd isn't getting into this enough. I also at the time owned a bar called Secrets Bar on Pine and Clark with my best
Oh, I
friend.
didn't know you owned that.
Yeah, that was my,
Okay.
so I would call up the shows after Ted let me in. I would call up the shows and I would plug my bar, like come to Secrets Bar after the Expos games, have a beer, blah, blah, blah. But I started just going with this cape that I put on and my winged hat, which is upstairs. I brought my trumpet here, but I forgot to bring the hat. I didn't know we'd be discussing that. And I just started appearing at the games for Major League Baseball. And I was actually the first mascot in Major League Baseball before they had the Philly Phantom and Yuppie and all that. I was the first guy, and anytime I saw a camera, I knew I was going there. I was making sure I got my 5, 10, 15 seconds on the newscasts, and I'd record them on the VHS, and that night I'd watch the newscasts, and that's where I started with the Expos. And then when then I switched to the Montreal Canadiens, and I was really lucky. I mean, lucky. I did it for years. I always paid my own way to get in. And then I approached Claude Mouton, who was a wonderful man, who was the vice president, communications guy.
Yeah.
And he gave me a pass, a standing room pass for 1, so I could have my spot. And then the next year he gave it to me for 2, and he let me in the building 30 minutes prior. So I was always center ice Reds, and that was my spot.
And so how many years did you do that for about?
I did that from the 70s till the Montreal Canadiens moved to, at the time, called the Molson Center. And when that changed, when the venue changed from the Shrine of Hockey, the Montreal Forum, to the Molson Center, it was a different vibe. It wasn't the same. So, I didn't keep going to the games. It just wasn't the same, but I have great memories. 2 Stanley Cups. I was in 2 parades. In 83, they put me in the float, the polar bear float. I was on there. I have great footage of it with my trumpet, blasting my brains out, as blowing till my lips were numb and I couldn't blow anymore. Take a beer and then try again.
But you came back a couple of years ago when the Canadiens played the Vegas Knights in the playoffs post-pandemic, when they were just allowing a few people in the building.
Yes, I was approached then by Paul Gallant from the Montreal Canadiens. I met with him and he said, we'd like to bring you back. And they did bring me back for the Vegas series, which was a great experience. Unfortunately, sometimes the timing is off. There were 500 people in the building. So as much as it was more of for me, the thing I thought that was of great value was just the fans that saw me again were so happy. Wanted selfies, back in the day.
Yeah, of course.
And
you added to the ambiance because you could hear it on TV, So that was great. That was a nice experience. So I know I brought you the Sports Celebrity Breakfast. We were together recently at the Sports Breakfast, and you whispered into Chantal Maccabee's ear, the head of communications, gave her a copy of your book. So who knows? Maybe we'll see you back there one day.
That would be great. And this over here is one of my original trumpets. I had about 7 or 8 of them.
Wow.
Back in the day, this is when I was a magician. So I put my little logo, Kid Mercury Entertainment.
Okay.
I was a kids entertainer, magician.
Gotta remember.
For many, many years, I did every birthday party in Côte Saint-Luc you can ever imagine.
Yeah. Can you play your Canadian standard song for us?
Charge!
It didn't all come out there. Some of the sound was muffled. I don't know whether it was the microphone or not. Can you do one more real close to the microphone? Yeah, just do the charge.
Go, Hobbs, go!
That's great. I think when you turn sideways with your microphone that's where the sound went up. But we get the point, and it brings back great memories. So let's get to the book. You got this wonderful, beautiful book out. This was something that's been percolating in your head for decades, right?
There's my book. It's reversed.
That book was this didn't happen overnight.
Oh no, Mike. I wrote this book when I had moved to the Dominican Republic with my family, in the late 90s. And I wrote this book for my two sons, Samuel and Olivier, as bedtime stories because, you know, we had moved to a new country. We went there for a year. Previously, I had worked at Club Med and they had rehired me at the time with my wife and my two young sons, 3 and 5. And this was years later, I chose to write this book for my boys. And I loved reading them stories. I think every parent should take a copy of a book, any book, and read them. You know, I had Grimm's fairy tales as a kid, and you know, you read through the book and you're touching something. I mean, most people now have their, you know, their iPads, etc. But there's something beautiful about putting your kids to bed with a lullaby or a bedtime story. And Stories for Souls of All Ages is an A to Z. I call it an A to Z spiritual journey. Every single story leads into the next. So if you read your kids one a night, trust me, they're going to have wonderful dreams.
But it took a long time for you to actually go ahead and actually publish it. It
did. And I really am, I'm a perfectionist. I must say, like, when I do something, I want it to be almost perfect. I wrote the book. It sat in a drawer for many years. I showed it to a few people. Everyone who read the stories loved the stories. They said, well, you should publish, blah, blah, blah. It's difficult for a new publisher to hook up with, you know, Random House or, you know, the big companies. So I eventually self-published it. But in that journey of self-publishing, I had sent it out to a few companies in Australia, and they really liked it. They said, we'll find you an illustrator. And I don't think so. I'm going to find my own illustrator. And that, Mike, took me over 2 years to find the right fit. And luckily for the internet, someone said to me, I said, you know, I've been to the book show in Montreal. I've been here, I've been there. I can't find anyone that I click with. Someone said to me, go on Facebook and, you know, join an author illustrator page. I did that. And then I went through the first 3 portfolios. The third one, I saw Kiki Kalahari. I saw the illustrator of my book, and my hair stood up like Spider-Man. Spider Sense was going crazy, and I knew I had found it. And then it began another 2.5 years of working together with her on the internet. I only had one Zoom call with her. It was all just
amazing,
back and forth. And I've had so many people tell me the illustrations, which I know
they really are. I mean, the stories are beautiful, and so are the illustrations. So there's 26 magical bedtime stories, and you know, that's another side of you that I didn't know, that you could do these things.
Yeah. Honestly, Mike, most people don't know most sides of everybody. When you're in the public and you're, as I was as Kid Mercury, the entertainer magician, you come across as this very vibrant, crazy, hyped up guy. But I mean, I am a Gemini. I wear number 11. I don't know if you can see it in the background.
I noticed that yesterday. What is 11? It's not.
Well, 11 is June 11th. I was born. I'm a true Gemini.
Oh, there we go. Okay, makes sense.
So I always wore number 11 in every sports team I was ever on, if I could get it. And when I started with the Montreal Canadiens, I always wore number 11. And so you don't know the other side of people. You don't walk in people's shoes. You have no idea sometimes. So I'm really proud of what I've done. It hit me, I would say, last week when I had my book launch. And so many people, I literally, I had 10 books left. I almost sold out completely of the books I had brought to my book launch. And I had such great feedback from people and little children. And I signed, you know, I've signed autographs as Kid Mercury. I did a few yesterday at the celebrity breakfast, but for my book, when I'm signing, I take the time to find out, and it's a beautiful experience. So I have a very soft side to me that most people don't know. Very,
the stories are very creative. They're all now, if someone is reading it to their kid, I could just picture my daughter 20 years ago reading a book like that to her. She would have gone crazy. She would have been smiling. And I could just imagine I was reading it, but yet I was an adult and I was reading it. Now, knowing I'm not a kid, I knew it wasn't real, but I really enjoyed the story. I started visualizing when I first opened the book and read about the alligator. and I started to think like, oh my God, I started to think of him like a real person, you know?
Exactly. That what you just said is why I chose animals and not people, because everyone has love for animals. And I mean, the stories, there are 25 animal stories, and the one non-animal story is a Halloween story about a little ghost on his first Halloween. So you know, Ali the alligator, Buzz the bumblebee, Crocky the crocodile. It goes on and on all the way to Zigzag the zebra, which I'll just reveal to people who will eventually, hopefully, you know, have a copy themselves of the book. Zigzag the zebra is pretty much a story of how my childhood was to an extent, whereas I had an older brother and an older sister who both went to Wager High. They were both head prefects. I was the little black sheep of the family coming along, this youngster, you know, third kid, and I just couldn't relate exactly to scholastics, but I had this amazing creativity. I loved to write stories. And so Zigzag the Zebra is a story about a happy-go-lucky, carefree zebra who just wants to be accepted for who he is, but he's always being compared to his older brother, older sister. Why can't you be like them, et cetera, et cetera. And I would just give a message to parents, and I learned this when I was the magician for 21 years, as Kid Mercury, doing so many birthday parties. Let the kids be. Let them explore. Let them unfold. And if you put too much pressure on a child, they may succeed scholastically, but you might be hurting them in other ways. So let them be who they're going to be. That's sort of the message I have. And in today's world, that's very relative.
I also got a kick out of the fact that Kid Mercury makes his way into the stories as a character.
Yeah, in the first story, and then there's another story where he appears as different people in the story. But in the first story, in the first story, Kid Mercury appears to help.
Yeah, he plays a big role in that first story. Yeah.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, he plays a big role in that first.
Yes,
story.
He does. I mean, there's sort of, you can't really see me, but there's the hat from when I was Kid Mercury back in the days, and I brought that along because when I was a kid's entertainer magician, I always wore the Sorcerer's Apprentice hat for all my magic shows, and you know, from Mickey Mouse, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and you know, in my shows, the hat would always mysteriously fall off, and the kids would just laugh their heads off. So I got him in the book, and I'm proud of all those years too as a children's entertainer. I helped a lot of kids. There were lots of children that were they had fears, and you know, sometimes even at a birthday party, if they see a magician or a clown, you know, they're going to freak out. But I always lock them up, and parents would say to me, we don't know how you did it. Our kid was so afraid before. Now, so same with the book. The stories will definitely bring some peace and comfort to all the children that read it, and they're off the wall. I mean, there's some great stories in there. There's Vinny the Vulture decides to try to be the highest vulture flyer, wants to break all the records, and he ends up going to the moon. You know, there's a sports story. There's one sports story in the whole book, which is Quitter the Quail, which I didn't mention when I was on Mitch Melnick's show or on CJAD, but Quitter the Quail was written about when my kids were young and we had some hit the bat on the street. You know, one of the kids had a tantrum because he struck out and he threw the bat down and he went in the house and he said, I quit.
Oh, yeah.
And I use that as a story to demonstrate to children that, you know, it's better to be a good sport. People will appreciate you more if you're a good sport than if you're, you know, a bad sport. And all those. So there's really a lot of good. I like to say kindness has never been so cool. That's sort of my moniker for this book. And
I like that. I like that.
If you're kind,
and you know, one of the things when I read the book, I said to myself, you know what, with all those illustrations, this would make a great cartoon on TV. Has that ever crossed your mind?
It has. In fact, I approached a Hollywood animator before the book was even published, and I thought the same thing. I thought Disney should pick this up and make a movie out of it. It'll be amazing. Or Oprah. Come on, Oprah, wherever you are. Find me, make me more famous.
Yeah. Well, I think you could do it. Now, where's the book available, Kid? Besides the Côte Saint-Luc library, after this video appears, I will make it available at the Côte Saint-Luc library for borrowing.
The book is available online On Friesen Press is one of the places. That's the publisher that published it.
Okay.
Friesen Press. You can also buy it on Amazon. I would just tell people, be careful when you buy on Amazon, because there are other sellers that put the price up. So make sure you're only paying the price for the actual book and not someone else reselling it. You got to be careful on Amazon. But quite a few people I know bought it on Amazon and got it within a few days. But support the local Canadian publisher, buy it from Friesen Press.
Well, Kid, it'll be very exciting to bring you back to Côte Saint-Luc, to the library, and up there, Eleanor London would be smiling, the late Eleanor London, who was there in your days.
Yeah.
And also we'll bring you back to Merton. So thanks for your time. Thanks for all the great work. And it was really great to connect with you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and to all your listeners. And you're doing an amazing job. And I appreciate very much being at the Celebrity Breakfast yesterday. And everything you're doing to help everyone in the community is wonderful. And I'm really glad that we connected. Thank you so much.
Great talking to Kid Mercury, whose
Peace
first
and
name
love.
is Harvey and whose last name will forever remain a mystery to his fans.